Nick, don't go anywhere right now. For an instant audit on the situation in Greece, let's go to Fox Business contributor Charles Payne, also Jim Frischling, president and co-founder of NewOak Capital. Gentlemen, you are in New York. And, of course, let's bring back Nick Hastings of Dow Jones Newswires as well. Nick, let me just have you set this up. Why do you think perhaps the euphoria over Greece may be a little premature?
Is this going to be some sort of mega bailout for Greece? Is it just going to be the fact that they're going to stand back and say that they will guarantee Greece's loans? And that, I think, is going to be one of the key elements here. Also, if it does look as if there is some sort of bailout by the European Union, this is actually going to damage its credibility. Remember, all along here, from the outset, these countries, Germany, France, have been saying, hey, Greece has got to sort this out itself. In other words, it wasn't going to come to its rescue. And here they are basically doing just that. The other thing on the other side of this, of course, is remember there are other countries there waiting in line with fiscal problems. Spain, Portugal, even Italy. And certainly Ireland, which has been taking some pretty tough medicine, fiscal medicine, because of its debt problems, are going to start saying, well, hey, what about us? You know, come on. And so what's going to be interesting to see here is how the markets respond to anything coming out of that European meeting in Brussels, and whether or not they are going to continue pressing, as we know that they have been, bond yields, but also the credit default swaps for those peripheral countries that are still really, crippled with all this debt. So I think that's really why this euphoria looks as if it could be a little bit short-lived, a little bit premature. Let's wait and see what comes out of Brussels first.
All right. Well, Nick, let's go to the other side of the pond and talk to Charles and Jim. Jim, let me ask you, Greece, the GDP of Greece is only about 2% of the Eurozone as a whole, so it really is fairly minuscule. Nick mentioned the other countries. Should the U.S. investor be worried about what's going on in Greece?
I do think the investors, U.S. investors should be concerned, particularly because the U.S. banking system does have exposure. However, again, I think the numbers are relatively modest. It is a fixable problem. The question is do they want to fix it? It's a choice between two evils. We talked about that earlier in the show. You don't want fiscally less responsible persons getting bailed out. And again, I talked about how it's eerily similar to what the U.S. just went through as we think about, again, risk takers being bailed out and the unintended consequences of rewarding to a certain extent that type of behavior. And again, as you've already alluded to, there are other countries that will be watching this very carefully because they themselves have issues that are not too dissimilar. In the case of Spain, potentially larger.
And Charles, it wasn't that long ago that people were saying, hey, why don't we make the euro the reserve currency as opposed to the US dollar, as the euro continues to sink right now. Does this have any impact overall on the global economic recovery, Charles, especially if we see other countries start to really slide down like we have seen the Greek budget?
I think it does, actually, particularly in a sense that one of the key components of this global recovery is confidence. I think, you talk about one of the big risks has been, protectionism, banks sitting on money, consumers sitting on money. Everyone's just sort of afraid to sort of leap in there. Certainly, even though Greece is not necessarily a large part of the continent's overall economy, it could be the first domino. And if this gets worse, certainly there's absolutely no doubt about it. There's a contagion factor, there's a confidence factor. And I think Jim brought up a fantastic point with respect to the moral dilemma of it all. But I think that I think when it's all said and done, looks like someone's going to have to step up, and more than likely it will be Germany with some sort of a rescue package.
I think you're right. We've got about 30 seconds. Let me go back to Nick on that issue then. Nick, do you think the Germans will ride to the rescue, and do you think we'll hear anything out of Brussels tomorrow?
Well, I think increasingly the thing is that they are putting something together here. They must be. I mean, let's face it, there is a dilemma here. I mean, the things they have tried not to do it, but, things have just continued to erode away. And so I think at the minute they actually are actually having to come in and do something. But as I said originally, it really depends on exactly what they're going to be doing, how much money they're going to be throwing at Greece, and whether or not they're prepared. I mean, as one of your guests over in the States just mentioned, I mean, Greece is small. But if this starts to erode confidence in something like Spain, that is a much bigger issue. Greece we could contend with. Spain would really start ripping the euro apart. So I think that's really one of the main problems here. How are they going to actually contain this problem to Greece? Build a firewall around it is the talk at the moment. We'll have to wait and see. Tomorrow will be a big day for that.
Exactly. Yes, we'll see what they come up with in Brussels, if they come up with anything. All right, Charles, Jim, and Nick, thank you so much for talking about the problems with Greece and perhaps other European countries and what to do about it. We want to know what you...
Which puts that off. We thought we'd be talking about that today, but instead, in an instant audit, as we bring back Charles Payne and Jim Frischling and NewOak, we're talking about, well, Honda. It's funny, remember Charles, the Honda executive, I think it was the CFO the other day, said this could affect everybody because he was talking about Toyota, says, oh, it makes people trust cars less. Well, sure it does. If your company's also announcing a recall, as they've done today.
Well, I also think we talked about when this news initially happened, and all the other automakers sort of tried to pounce on it, and you got to be so careful.
Yeah. Well, that's what. Remember, Alan Mulally said this. We were going to be humble because this could be anybody.
Yeah, I mean, 2 weeks from now, and it will be everyone at some point. I mean, they all have these recalls, and I think the thing with Toyota is how long they knew about the problem, the gravity of the problem, and how they reacted to it, which is, I think, is going to be a greater stain than the actual braking problem itself, or the if
it was one recall, an isolated incident.
And if they would have been straightforward about it, but
right
every day you hear different stories that they might have known as early as 2005, and that's you can't trust if you can't trust a company, particularly. You drive your family. It's essentially a car could be a weapon. I mean,
sure.
it's a couple of tons, and
do you think
it's got to stop when you hit the brakes?
Well, I know exactly right. So when you hit the gas, they shouldn't take off uncontrollably. It's simple stuff, right? It's not like it's the rearview mirror here that's giving them a problem, Jim. So the idea of trusting car companies, is it a Toyota-specific issue, or when companies like Honda make announcements like they did today? Charles points out these things happen all the time, but in this particular environment, I'm sure it gets more scrutiny. Is it an industry-wide issue? Trust.
It's definitely an industry-wide issue, and I think what these stories are starting to expose, or at least inform drivers and consumers, is this is largely a self-regulated industry. There are some checks and balances, but at the end of the day, it is self-regulated. And Toyota, I think this story is getting worse. Whether it's steering or more issues, the fact remains the extent that they've known about this and the extent that there's been misinformation or an unwillingness to give the information, I think is quite alarming.
So are you not one of these investors? We've had a couple of them in the last couple of days that have come in and said, no, this is a buying opportunity. This is overdone. You don't think so?
I mean, I think the news coming out, every day actually seems to be piling on and getting stronger to be concerned.
Would you buy a Toyota car right now?
I would not buy a Toyota car
so
right now.
It's enough for you to say, you know what, forget it. I'll get something else. I mean, if you were in the market for a car, I don't know if you are, but if you were, you would say no, not Toyota.
I would say no. And
how about you, Charles? Because we joke around about car. Remember you had that Chrysler, what was it, the Chrysler 300 that gave you it was all lemon, right?
I still have that old jalopy. But see, the good news
would you buy a Toyota?
It came with the engine light on, so I knew that I was in for.
You knew what you were getting into.
Exactly.
But what about a Toyota? Say you were in the market now, one of your famous trips to the car dealerships, which you've had in the past.
I actually went to a Toyota dealership. They were terrible people. I mean, my experience wasn't great anyway. So I should have shorted the stock.
No matter
then.
who you go to, you always have
issues. I swear, kind of on my lifetime, every time I've had a bad experience somewhere, and I've watched the stock, it's always gone down. It's always happened to me. I don't know why they go short.
So in that case, you'd stay away from Toyota stock and its cars right now because
right now, listen, I think you got a lot of traders in the stock right now, but just in the last week, the earnings estimates have dropped pretty sharply, and if I'm a long-term investor, maybe I let the dust settle a little bit.
I think as of yesterday, they'd lost something like $30 billion in market cap because of this whole issue since the...
Well, the stock was already down. The stock was $116 in February of 2008, so it was already down, and it was already looking somewhat attractive, maybe to a longer-term investor. But why not wait 3 months, let the smoke settle, and dust settle, rather, if you're a 401k guy, and then if you want to buy it then.
All right, then we'll get yourself a nice big Sequoia there, right, Charlie?
There you go.
They're on sale. They give you a good deal. All right, guys, thanks a lot. We're going to want to know what you all think about this.